Hi, I'm Liz Webb. I'm the International Sales Manager here at Coral Expeditions. This is our webinar on the Kimberley, focusing on the wildlife. One of the amazing stories that I have to tell from when I did my cruise in September 2018 was actually arriving at the Lassipede Islands on the Zodiac, or actually it was the Explorer. We hadn't transferred over to the Explorers yet. I could see the beach and everything, and you could see all the turtle tracks going up the beach, and I was like, wow, are they the turtle tracks? Is that for the laying of the eggs? And one of the other expedition leaders was like, no, can't you see the tail? It was a crocodile. And then the other one said, no, she's right, they're turtle tracks. And then we started hearing this flapping sound. I looked along the shore, the edge of the beach and everything. There was about 4 turtles lined up along the beach, but then there's a turtle on each of their backs. Yes, they were up to no good. And it was just the noise and everything. It was like, oh, wow, everyone's just taking photos. So it was just an insight into the Lassipedes and also into the wildlife of the Kimberley. There is just so much happening around in the Kimberley, and we've got Steve Cox with us today, and he's was one of our expedition leaders, and now we've got his expertise in the office, and he's going to share his time exploring the Kimberley and what to look out for and what to do, and being able to get through and have a look. So welcome, Steve.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been with the company about 12 years, and a bit more than 10 of those out in the Kimberley region, and a couple of years before that. So I think the big thing to remember about wildlife in the Kimberley is it's a vast region. And I think when I first went there, the mistake that I made was that I thought I was going to see things all the time. And I think in the Kimberley, there's lots of amazing things wildlife-wise to view and take photos of, but you have to be patient. That's my big takeaway about it. And what I do strongly suggest, before I talk about anything else, is when you come on a Kimberley trip, buy yourself some good binoculars. You can buy a decent pair for $200 or $300 now, and it'll be the best investment that you make on your trip, because it can just bring, you might be seeing an osprey where they're pointing it out in a tree, and you can see it, but it's just a little bit far away. But if you've got a reasonable pair of binoculars, you can bring that bird to life by, just simply putting them up and getting a much better look at them. So I think, it's really worth the investment, and you've got them then as well to take on other trips and take them to the cricket, whatever you want. But that's my big tip about wildlife, is have a decent pair of binoculars, because it will certainly enhance your trip in the Kimberley.
And look, use your camera secondary.
Yeah.
Have a look first, and then line it all up and take in the surrounds of where you are. Sure. And then you actually start spotting everything. Then pull out your camera for those memories.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, little flatbacks. So the Kimberley is really important for the population of turtles. In Australia, it has places like the Lassipede Islands and Big Island and many other places that are really, really important hatcheries for the turtles. And of course, we know that the female turtle goes pretty much back to the same place where they came from. So, the chances of a turtle survives is about 1 in 1,000. So if a female turtle survives and it's one of the very lucky ones that makes it, they don't, they generally only come back to land when it's time for some little baby turtles. And the Kimberley has many particular protected areas where they know that a majority of these turtles come back to. And places like the Lassipede Islands, where we're able to visit, which is an incredible marine reserve, you'll see juvenile turtles by the hundreds in the lagoon. You won't necessarily see large turtles. They tend to be offshore. But in that lagoon, you'll see loads and loads of small, medium-sized turtles. And they're there because there's lots of food and because it's safe. It feels nice and safe in there. But, of course, that attracts other things in there, like sharks come in, and I've seen crocodiles in there coming in because they know that there's easy food in there as well. So I think if you do get to, the tides are right and you get to go into the Lacepede Islands, as Liz said, you'll see, you know, turtle tracks everywhere up onto the sand, and generally on the sea-facing side, you'll see where the female turtles have dragged ashore at night, laid their eggs, covered them over, and then gone back. And it looks like someone's rained bombs down on that ocean side. It's just pitted all the way along. Hundreds and hundreds of turtle sites that are there all the time.
So are the flatback turtles found at Lacepede as
They
well?
are, but not only in small amounts. And it's very specific where flatbacks come ashore in the Kimberley, and the researchers know exactly where they do. But at the Lacepedes, generally more of the green turtles there, but there are flatbacks that do come ashore there. And we can't go ashore at the Lacepedes, but you can see them very close on the Zodiacs. When we go ashore at a place like Big Island, which is another really important turtle nesting site, you can get very, very close, and the guest lecturers and expedition team will be able to point out and tell you more about what actually happens on those sites.
Now, what else also fascinating at the Lacepede are the boobies.
Boobies.
The brown boobies.
Yeah. Cute as a button when they're little, aren't they?
Yeah.
That's a very young juvenile, and it's almost the size of mum. And they come out an enormous size, and you might think, well, why does that happen? Well, birds, think about the hostile environment that bird is in. It can't muck around being a kid for long, right? It doesn't get to sit down and watch TV and have, you know, that sort of thing. It's a tough environment. So they're born fairly big, and that's still got its down feathers. And you might think, well, boy, that bird must be overheating, but it's actually the opposite. The down feather is what keeps that bird cool. It cools it down, right? Because it doesn't have the ability at the moment to use its mouth to cool itself down by opening up and closing and cooling. Can't do that. So the fluffy down it's coolant, like an ice pack on it. Yeah. And they're very cute, and they've no idea what's going on. So, you know, we're able to get up in the Zodiacs very close to the edge, and often the birds are by themselves, the juveniles, because the parents have gone off to get food, have something to eat themselves, get some food for old young Eric here, and then come back, and then they regurgitate that food back down for the bird. And this bird's hungry all the time, non-stop. It has to get big and strong fast, and then very quickly it loses those down feathers, and it'll start getting its flight feathers, and then off it goes. And that's one of the largest rookeries for the brown booby in the world, right here. So it's an incredible place to see. Eric too. We'll always see crocodiles on a trip. How many you see, of course, varies. It's luck of the draw, really. It's a lot of times with crocodiles, it's being in the right place at the right time. And I always say to people, crocodiles are seen when they want to be seen. If they don't, they could be right next to your boat, and you'd never know. They could be sitting under the Explorer or under your Zodiac. You'd never know. It could be a meter away, right? They're seen when they want to be seen. But in saying that, like this particular chap here, and I remember this particular photo actually.
Did you take it?
I did. And this is at Prince Frederick Harbour. And we were coming back from having been in Parosis Creek, and we were cutting behind the waterway behind Naturalist Island. And there was this crocodile who was baking in the sun, but and he's changed a bit there with just before that, he was actually up on his with his hind legs raised. Had his tail up in the air. It was very weird. I don't know what he was doing. Calling, I don't know. And he was just the most photogenic crocodile you've ever seen. He posed for everybody and turned around, and he was a bit of a showman. But you can see he'd been in the sun all day because he's beautifully dry. And so the hypothermic animals, so they need that sun during the day, and they'll, as long as they can stay out of the water during the day, they will to warm up, and then at night they slip into the water and they just move along those coastal edges, getting their food. So generally they'll have their little arms, claws out the front, and then they just whack it in, and it's a snack.
Yep.
And they've got their dinner.
Because it's like a solar panel on
the
top.
Yeah, they just need to be warm. Yeah. When it's cold, it's very difficult for them to get moving because they're reptiles. Same with snakes, very difficult to move when it's cool. So there's nothing they enjoy better than a good book and a lie in the sun for the day. And often, if we just keep enough distance, they won't feel scared because they feel safer in the water than they do out. So, what we always try and do is don't get too close to them because we don't want to upset. Because they need to be, when they get in the water, they cool down. Yeah. So we try to just keep our distance enough that we can take photos, enjoy, but we're not changing what that crocodile has to do. Yeah. And my favourite little fellows, you might see my finger here. One of them gave me a nibble a few years ago. It's a little bit of a funny story. I was on the platform and I actually just had my hand down by my side on the edge of the platform, and one of them just came out of the water and he just nicked my finger and cut it open right. You can see it in the scar. And I don't know what he was thinking. Maybe he thought I was a fish or so. I don't know, but he just nicked me. And it was then I learned that they actually do have quite sharp, small grinding teeth, for the type of food that they eat. But these guys, you'll see them quite a few. Wherever you're anchored, they tend to turn up at night because the lights draw them in, and it's easy food. So it's several places where they'll just nose up, and their eyesight's not great, but all their other senses is fantastic. We see them at Talbot Bay, again, not all the time. It's nature, but you will see them during the daytime at Talbot Bay, and that's not normal behaviour. So their behaviour's been changed a bit, I guess, at Talbot Bay because of all the other boats around. And normally these guys would be tucked up into a cave, piled up on top of each other. So they're one of the few sharks that actually enjoys the company of other sharks. So they'll actually pile up and have a snooze on top of each other. But most sharks are quite solitary, but not these fellows. But at Talbot Bay, you've got a chance that sometimes they'll come up to the back of the boat during the day, and we're able to just drop the platform enough so that they will actually just stick their nose up without them getting into any sort of trouble. And it just allows people to, and they're very curious animals, incredibly curious. And the male, a bigger one can be 3.5, 3.7 meters. Yeah, really cool shark. Osprey. It looks like Monty Reef just there. But ospreys are one of the several birds of prey that we see, and it's probably of the birds of prey, it's probably the one we see the most, along with the white-bellied sea eagle. These guys, you'll see coastally, and also shown here where they've actually come out to a reef system where the water's where the waters come out and the reefs sort of, you got water just coming over the top, and that means that fish are trapped. And so his favorite food is a nice fish, right?
Nice and
so
fresh.
He's just opportunistic, and he knows that if he comes out to a certain spot at a certain time of day, the supermarket's open, and he doesn't have to work hard to get his food.
Mm-hmm.
And so we often see these out at reef systems, and there's a great one at Banzertuck Bay around the back of Jar Island. And as long as I've been going to Jar Island, the same pair, and Ospreys mate for life. They disappear out of mating season, and the boys are a bit naughty, very naughty, but they always come back together and they're all happy and loved during the season. But there's an amazing pair there that have been at the same nest for as long as I've been going there, so over 10 years. And they've successfully produced either 1 or 2 chicks each season. So it's something you will see them, and they like to nest on top of rocks. They'll build their big wide nest on top of rocks out in the sun. But what they'd like is view of 360 degrees, and it's always somewhere where land-based animals can't get to the young. Yep. So things like quolls and those sorts of things can't get to the egg, because if a quoll or something could get to that egg, that's a tasty treat. So they're very careful where they build their nests so that it's impossible for any other creatures.
I thought they just like scenery.
Oh, and the scenery, of course.
They're prime real estate.
And they've also got to space themselves between other birds. They need space. They don't want to be too close to another bird of prey, particularly a white-bellied sea eagle or a Brahminy kite. So you got to find your space and book your spot.
Oh, God. Sounds busy out there.
Yes, beautiful little creatures, and quite widespread in the Kimberley region. But one of the really, I think, good spots to see them is at Talbot Bay. We used to see them all the time, and then there was a terrible fire went through Talbot Bay, and we stopped seeing them for probably 4 years. I think a lot of them probably disappeared in that fire, which is awful. Some of them probably retreated to other places, but in the last 2 years, we've seen them back. They've come back, and they've gone back to the same spots. There's a particular cave that we know there where we used to always see them, and then the recent few years, they've come back, and they're raising their young at the same little cave. So which is really fantastic. And your best chance, we try to get out in Talbot Bay and just up into the start of Cyclone Creek, where there's a great place to see them first thing in the morning, because what they sleep, they get into their little sleeping bag at night in their pillow and fall asleep. And then a bit like us, they come down, and then they like to get some sun on their chest in the morning before they have a nibble and go back to sleep. And so they'll come down with their cup of coffee, and just, you'll see them just sitting back, catching a bit of sun. That's the best time we know to go out, and you're not going to see them in the middle of the day, right? It's only us that's out in the middle of the day. They're back in their cave, whatever they're doing, watching TV or whatever it is that they do. But that's the time you see them, and they're really amazing little creatures. And I think the best thing I ever saw at Talbot Bay with these little fellows was, we were heading up Cyclone Creek, and we saw this rock wallaby racing at full speed up and down the rocks. And then we couldn't work out what he was doing. But then when we looked behind, there was this dingo was chasing him. The dingo was full speed chasing this rock wallaby, but he could not catch the rock wallaby. Was too fast, had too many moves, and on the bottom of their feet, it's like, if you ever touch it, it's like sandpaper. So they're designed, and I've watched them go vertical up there. They're designed that it just rips like sandpaper onto the rock. So where we'd be all flummoxing around up there, they are perfectly built and designed to live in that particular area. So, you know, we'll see them in other places, but I think Talbot Bay is such a great place to see them. Right, here we go, the Chestnut Rail. All right, not the most pretty bird, but he's right up high on the, if you're an ornithologist, a birder, a bird nerd, this guy's really high up on your list because he's endemic only to this area. Oh, wow. And probably there's two really good places to see them. There's a particular side creek up at Red Cone Creek where you can see them first thing in the morning, but best place is Prince Regent River. So when we're heading up to the King Cascade, on the way, if the tide's out enough, there's a couple of side creeks where you can stop. And often on the low tide, these guys are out. And this is where this photo is taken. This is right on the banks of the Prince Regent River. And you'll hear these birds before you see them. They make this terrible gutsache squawking noise. Hence the name, the gutsache bird. Or I know one of our guest lecturers there, Morrison, calls them the mud chicken. But they're a really special bird to see and photograph because they're so rare to see. And I had a lady she a few years ago came on 2 trips because she was an ornithologist and wanted to see this bird. And the first trip, the trip before she came on, I reckon we saw 10 of them. The trip she came on the first time, not a one. But then the second trip she came on, we saw quite a few of them up the Prince Regent River.
So she was happy.
She was incredibly happy to see and then take really nice photos of. And they're quite a cool bird. And the chestnut comes from that really chestnutty colour underneath. And they also have these eyes that just, as you can see, they're a really chestnutty red type of colour. And you know, it's not that it's the prettiest bird, are they? And a terrible noise. But I think one of the real highlights birding in the Kimberley is being able to see them. Mud skippers. The giant mud skipper can be found in the Kimberley, and you know they're a decent size. And I think there's 2 really good places to see them, and that's at Parosis Creek on the low tide. So you need your tide out, and they'll come out of their holes and be up on, and they're eating. So they're just eating mud and taking protein out of that, and then the mud gets disappeared out the other end. But what's fascinating, of course, about these guys is they're a hybrid. So they're an in-between with nature. So as things have developed, right, and some animals went from sea to land and grew legs, right? These guys are both. So you can see its little flipper there. It's part hand still, and they can get up and walk on the mud, right? So they've gone part way, and it's a fascinating piece of nature.
They didn't know what they wanted to be.
Yeah, that's right. And so they've taken the best of both, where you know, they swim quickly and beautifully, but when they're on land, they can either just slither along on the mud, or they can get up and walk. And I saw one actually walking on a branch of a tree, which I wouldn't have believed, but I saw it at Red Cone Creek, and it was walking quite adeptly along this branch of a tree. So they're a really fascinating creature, and the giant mud skippers are a decent size of your hand. And certainly on low tides, you'll be able to get up close, and beautiful colorings, and this really blue mark underneath their little pop-up popcorn eyes. Yeah.
That's what I was noticing. It's their eyes and the blue. That was really coming.
Yeah, and you can still see the remains of their fin on top. These guys were really only classified as a separate species in 2005, I believe. These are snub fin dolphins, and they were probably just being mistaken for irrawaddies. But it was the discovery, I believe, of a skull around that time that made scientists just think, well, this is a little bit different. And then when they started looking, there it was. And we see them, not every time, but a majority of the time going up the Prince Regent River, you'll see the snub fin dolphin. And it is one weird looking dolphin. And it's got a very different shape, and it has a neck, and that neck can turn 180 degrees. So it can be swimming one way with its neck looking back the other way. And it's because it gets out and pokes up and looks around. It also, the most amazing thing that I saw it do at Red Cone Creek one night when I was out just watching these guys hunting was it lined up a fish and then it tailed behind the fish, and then what it did, it shot a jet of water that was so powerful that it stunned the fish in front, and the fish got all confused, and then the dolphin didn't know where it's going, and the dolphin just swarmed straight in and swallowed the fish. So that's their hunting technique that they use, which is very unique, but like an archer fish, right, that fires at water. These guys fired an incredibly powerful jet of water. And they stay in pods and they do nothing exciting. If you think about dolphins that, bottlenose that leap out of the water, or spinner dolphins, these guys are the opposite, right? They just like to just stay nice and hidden, and they're estuarine. So they're up rivers and in estuarine areas and basins. You won't see them frolicking out in the open water. But these guys are endemic to Australia, and they're the most recently described species of dolphin. And you've got, you know, it's nature. There's never 100%, but we know we see them at Red Cone Creek, and we know we see them up the Prince Regent River. So I think, and we always stop and you know, it's amazing. I think they're an amazing thing to see. That
they look amazing. And when I first saw the photo, I was like, is that a dugong? And then I'm like, no,
it's
not a dugong.
You can see how you can make that mistake with them. And they're beautiful in their own right.
Oh, they are. He's got a little smirk on his face.
He's smiling about something, yes.
Thanks so much, Steve, for showing us through and talking about the wildlife of the Kimberley. Next webinar that we have is actually a live one, and that is with Dawn Singleton, and that is on the 26th of April. Steve did give you a very good tip right at the beginning. Don't forget to bring your binoculars along. If you don't have a pair, go and make an investment. You will definitely use them on future expedition cruises or sporting events, or just even bird watching out in your own backyard. Sure. Thanks so much for your time.
Hey, you're very welcome, anytime.
And as I said, really it's taken me back to doing the Kimberley again.
Me too.
Yeah. Thank you.